I've had many leading experts on this show, including Matthew Walker, and they've all said the same thing about sleep. They've said it's the biggest positive investment you can make in your own performance. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're consistently tired, poor decision-making will follow and eventually cause other things to fail in your life. So if you're looking to optimize your recovery, you should start looking at what you're sleeping on. Our sponsor, Helix, makes high-quality mattresses tailored to your body. It doesn't matter if you run hot, sleep on your side, or need something firm. Helix has a mattress for you. And I asked them recently to send one to a member of my team, and Juan received it. And we travel a lot, so when he's home, quality sleep really matters. And he told me he's getting the best sleep of his life. And the data backs it up, with 82% of people in a Helix study saying they saw an increase in their deep sleep. And with a 120-night trial, you've got 4 months to prove it to yourself. You can get 27% off at helixsleep.com/diary. That's helixsleep.com/diary. Hello. My guest this week is Tobi Pearce. And for those of you that don't know Tobi, he's the CEO of Sweat. Tobi describes Sweat as the world's biggest online digital gym. It's a digital empire that offers fitness and health guidance for women. Tobi's start to life was unconventional, to say the least. Choosing to leave home at just 16 years old due to family and personal issues, he set off in life to become a self-made entrepreneur. He started off by working in a music shop before turning to personal training. And this is where he met his now fiancée, Kayla. Kayla, if you don't know, is known for being one of the world's biggest online fitness influencers. Their business was born in 2014, and through Sweat, they're already generating hundreds of millions in revenue. They have a dedicated community of more than 20 million women using their products all around the world, and the impact they've had on health and fitness is astronomical. Tobi is smart. He's funny, direct, honest, driven, pragmatic. Tobi is an exception. He thinks differently. He's the type of person you would bet on no matter what they decided to do. This is one of those conversations where I walked away smarter, more motivated, and more inspired. And I know, and I hope, that you will too. Without further ado, I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody is listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. I don't really have questions as such, Tobi, but wanted to thank you for joining me first and foremost.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Making the time. I know you're a very, very busy man. I read through your story and I was quite, and this is just my honest opinion, I was quite shocked. I was shocked at the start you had in life and also how high you then managed to climb from that start. Because I think if people read what I read, they would assume someone that has that start to life would then maybe go through life feeling sorry for themselves, you know? And we see that a lot, right? So I guess the first place to start is, how was your start to life? Can you talk about your childhood?
Yeah, a little bit, sure. I mean, so, probably late on in high school, I kind of made the decision to leave home. So I was kind of living by myself from sort of 16 years old. Definitely, which complicates things, I think. And
why did you leave home?
Just, rough family environment, I think, to a degree. But I think, and also, and this would probably kind of talk a little bit to, my independence and problem solving or whatever. Like, I felt like I was always kind of in control of my destiny. And so at a point, when I was like very, very young, I was kind of like, well, I'm not probably really that happy, here now, but I think that I can control the outcome of that.
So sorry to interject there, but for me, that point is really, really important because for whatever reason, and I've talked about this on this podcast before, I felt the same way. I did not know the future, but for some reason I was arrogant enough to think that I would be completely fine. And I've, over the years, managed to kind of like look back and try and figure out why that was. But for you, why at 16 years old did you think you could control your own destiny?
Yeah, I think, and perhaps, maybe it's a little bit of shared arrogance or it's the confidence, however you want to define it. And perhaps probably even a little bit of naivety, I think at a young age. But I think that, to be honest, I think, what is an entrepreneur if not a problem solver, right? And so I think that, literally even from the age of sort of like 7, 8, 9 years old, like I was always a really, kind of great problem solver. And I also not only was good at it, but I actually really enjoyed it. So not that I think that any kind of teenager really enjoys, the thought of leaving home. Yeah. But I was just kind of very confident that, that I can kind of keep myself up on my own 2 feet. I'll figure out a way to, get a job. I'll figure out a way to get through university and make a life for myself. And I think, if anything, that was like the challenge of succeeding was almost probably the largest motivator. I've gone through adversity. It's like, but I'll come out the other side. Yeah. And it'll be fine. But like, where am I going to be and how do I get there? Like, that's pretty stimulating challenge for me, I think. So
did you have brothers and sisters?
I have one sister. Yeah. But again, probably not really the strongest relationship. But I think even from a very young age, like I was kind of quite introverted and, like to myself and kept to myself. So, yeah.
And was your relationship with your parents close?
Oh, I think, probably with my dad, pretty good. Yeah, definitely for sure. But I think, stuff that was happening in and around my family and totally respect that this is probably a little different, like for a teenager, but I was kind of just not really that patient with it. And I think as well, like, to be honest, even if that stuff had not been happening, like I was always sort of the person that, to be honest, I probably would have left shortly after anyway. Like I was always like, I've got to go on and do something, so you might have read online as well. Like, I was, in high school kind of got asked to leave because I wasn't really doing much work at school. And then, eventually kind of in Australia, you consider, a stat test, which is called a stat test to get into university basically, but tested pretty good, got into uni and then just picked myself up and kind of went, like I didn't have anyone telling me to go to university or like, forcing me or paying for it. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to learn. Mm-hmm. And because I knew that basically in order to succeed in life at anything, like a fundamental part of that is learning and working hard. So I just went ahead and did that and wanted to make the best of it for myself.
So 16 years old, asked to leave school?
Would have been 15 years old, asked to leave school and then moved to another school and then sort of finished high school. Mm-hmm. And then about sort of 6 to 8 months after that, probably sat that test to get into university and then sort of started picking myself up after that.
And when you moved out of your house, presumably you didn't move out of your house with loads of funds?
No. So I was actually working in a music shop. So I studied classical piano for the majority of my life. I was working at a music shop, sort of selling pianos and selling sheet music about 5 or 6 hours a week for sort of $15 an hour sort of thing. I sort of had that. A couple of my friends were pretty helpful and sort of, helped me to kind of bridge the gap. But I think, I was able to pretty quickly like pivot out of that into figuring out like, what do I want to do? I want to study and learn. Like, how do I pay for that study? Like how do I actually cover that cost and how do I find a job that's flexible? And I was like, I really like the health and fitness industry and I'm training in the gym a bit. So like I'll go and do a personal training course. And then, like literally from there, everything kind of really picked up massively. So, a matter of months after that, like I was, personal training in a gym. Sort of within 6 months of that, like I'd started, sort of my first business. So I was running my own business as a personal trainer in a gym, but also sort of then went out and started doing boot camps and running boot camps for women outdoors. Mm-hmm. Another sort of 6 months after that, had my second franchise. Another 6 months after that, Kayla and I had our first online business together. So the momentum really picked up when I kind of took things into my own hands and got on the front foot, as opposed to, the other way that someone can go through adversity is, choose to feel sorry for themselves or whatever. But that's a very slow, sort of depressing path, not one that I really think that I wanted to go on. So,
and so you go to university, you graduate when you're how old?
Didn't graduate uni.
Didn't graduate.
No, so got about 2.5, 3 years in, I think. And then sort of had started the online business that was doing sort of about 10 million a year at that point and like highly profitably. So I was sort of like, I'll defer uni because like at this point in time, it was, critically, and to be kind of frank, it was like, what's the ROI on my time? What return on investment do I get? Like I can go to university for however long to learn in a structured environment, or I could put that on, time out temporarily. I can force my own learning quicker by doing online courses or reading books, and I can run a business on my own terms. Mm-hmm. So the long-term plan wasn't necessarily to never go back to university, but it was more about, these opportunities don't always come along. And when you get an opportunity, you got to go. So
you dropped out?
Yeah. So deferred initially. And then sort of a year and a half later, we were doing about, 25 million a year in revenue. Nice. And, then I was, obviously sort of just like, I think, again, same situation again, but sort of a year to 12 to 18 months later, like, what's the ROI on my time? Do I go back to university for another 2.5 years and slow down my business? What would happen in 2.5 years if I was spend like 150%, like at this company? Like, what would that actually be? And then, so about another year and a half later, we're doing sort of $50 or $60 million in revenue, and another year and a half later is kind of now, where we're doing about 100 million in annual turnover plus, and trying to grow still.
So one of the things like that, by the way, that's fucking impressive. Just before I transition onwards, but one of the things that I get asked all the time is I'll get messages from young kids that are at university now, and they either have an idea, they're either working on an idea on the side. Often there's very little traction, and they're asking me the question, Steve, shall I drop out of university? What's your advice to them? Yeah, well, I mean, look, so I think in that situation, there's probably not going to be one rule or one size fits all, right? Like, I mean, my thought process was pretty logical, sort of like, basically, am I making enough money right now that I can actually justify not going to university, like when compared to basically what job I would be able to get after that? Am I going to potentially yield a significantly larger benefit by not going to uni in the short term? Like, yes, like I probably think so. And I guess also what's the opportunity cost of going to uni? See, if I was to go to uni, regardless of the money, let's actually forget the dollar amount. It was more like these type of opportunities and business opportunities are, no, I wouldn't say necessarily say like once in a lifetime, but like when they're here, they're here. And if you don't take that opportunity and you don't get on the front foot, then it's gone. Sure. Right. So I think for people that are in university now, if you've already started running a business and you're already getting revenue and you're already like getting growth, I think it's kind of up to them to determine at what point. For some people it could be 200 grand a year. For some people it could be 20 million a year. It really depends. It depends on the intensity of the business and depends on the intensity of the learning. And also I think as well, if you drop out of university and then all of a sudden you're not studying, like you're not reading, you're not watching videos online, like you're not like forcing yourself to learn, well, if you need university to be the thing that actually causes you to grow, then I'd probably keep going. But for me, I was like, I could actually learn a lot quicker by not being at university. And that's like literally what's happened, So I'll read sort of like 50 to 100 books a year, podcasts, travel, networking, whatever. Like they're, for me and my mindset, far more valuable learning opportunities. So I wouldn't say there's like a one size fits all. I think it's kind of balancing the odds. I know you mentioned, I completely agree. And you mentioned there that you read 50 to 100 books a year. Whenever someone mentions books on the internet ever, the first question people ask is, what's your favorite book? Yep. So I'd be remiss if I didn't. Yeah. So I think, at different points in time, different books, right? Sure. I think for me, sort of over the last probably 2 years, probably 2 books. I think, one of them is Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is sort of like really a really good, almost in some ways statistical analysis of the reason why businesses have gone, like top 100 businesses in the world, how they went from being effectively good businesses to becoming great companies that stood the test of time. And so for me, that was really kind of eye-opening about, the approach to business should obviously very often be about sustainability, not just growth. So I think that was really critical. And then, probably, more specific like subject matter, but there's a book, really, really clever guy called Tian Zhu who runs a company called Zora, and they're basically a subscription business, subscription management software. And he wrote a book called Subscribed, and it's sort of just a really, really enlightening view on like modern business models and like how effectively the subscription economy is going to change business in a really big way. So, because we run in subscription business, that was really, really good for us. Yeah. Okay. And, going back to the business you started in university, that started making $10 million, $20 million a year. Talk to me about that and what business that was. And yeah, sure. So basically, after I've been running a couple of boot camps, and Kayla we were doing studio, like running a PT studio. We entered the online world selling ebooks. So this is sort of like really early 2014 almost. Instagram's kind of new thing, and ebooks are sort of there, but sort of not. And in the fitness industry, definitely not really. So we had a lot of people online. Effectively, we generated a decent fan base to effectively lead generate for boot camps. But then what started to happen was, obviously you can't just build fans in kind of one suburb. So the fans online sort of started being like, we've got some in America, some in Russia, some in wherever, and they were like, I see your client transformations and I see your workouts,
to look really cool. Like I want to do that. So we kind of, just wrap that up all up in an ebook, a couple of 100 pages, package it with a whole bunch of like what we believe to be kind of almost mandatory like education material, and sort of, put it on a website that we built that was really gross and barely worked and crashed all the time and whatever. But pushed out on the internet, and then sort of off it went. So, we were, to be honest, like really surprised. We launched it and said in the first week probably generated more revenue and sales than what we would have done in like 6 months in our existing business. Nice. Obviously the initial emotion is like, yes, like that's amazing. But then it's kind of like, oh, but what about next week? And then,
sure.
So that was, and that, I think to be honest, that kind of almost fear, but like critical view of, what's next and what's coming for the business is probably what kind of helped us to take it from just like here's an idea into like, it's an actual legitimate business. Mm-hmm. So
I didn't really introduce Kayla.
Yeah. So
I probably should take a step back and introduce Kayla. Obviously I know, but I'm not sure everybody listening knows. Who's Kayla?
So Kayla's my fiance, but she's a personal trainer. So Kayla had seen us, and we started dating sort of probably about a year and a half before we sort of started working together, at least online. But yeah, she was like we went to market effectively with her brand, like her name is a brand, to sell what was initially the Bikini Body Guide. So has now become an app, obviously. She was the face and the name of everything that we did, sort of for the first few years, and is now currently, Forbes recently named her the most influential sort of fitness icon in the world, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, she's having a massive impact on the space. So
you've just recently announced that she's got a baby on the way.
Yes. Yeah. So we got engaged sort of beginning of last year. And then, we're currently pregnant, due in the, 8 weeks and 5 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so pretty soon, yeah.
And how long have you guys been together?
Coming up 6.5 years.
And you've been working in business for the same period of time?
About five, yeah. So, I mean, even really early on, like when, Kayla was doing her personal training and I was doing mine, like we had this sort of, shared and parallel kind of view on like women's fitness and workouts and client engagement, except I also kind of had this really, deep like passion for business, so, even like really early on in our relationship, it was more just kind of, I'd help her problem solve certain stuff in the business, but then she'd have this really great idea about content we could create or, different workouts we should do. And so it was kind of a really, the perfect partnership in some ways, like in that way really early on. And we knew each of our strengths and we kind of stuck to that. So.
And what's it like doing business with someone that you're romantically involved with?
Yeah, sure. The question we get asked all the time. Yeah. I think, probably to be clear, like early on, it was very different to what it is now. So like now, like I don't really see her at all during the day. Like it's not like we're in meetings together. I'm more so doing, the business stuff and what's coming next and whatever for the whole organization. And she's obviously kind of more critically focused on her own brand. But I think, early on, there's definitely kind of some, like sometimes there's tension or more, kind of discussion about certain stuff. But I think we've been really fortunate. Like we've, to be honest, probably never really, I don't think we've ever really actually argued about business or anything like that. And I think that really comes down to like, my role in this is X and, her role in it is Y. And like, we both kind of have the trust in one another that we're going to dominate in those two areas. And that's that.
Right.
So
Kayla did a post on Facebook that I've got here.
Yeah, sure.
Do you know which post I'm referring to?
No, I don't. No. There's a lot of posts there.
It's a post about you.
Yeah.
She says, on Tobi's profile, it says he was expelled from school, but people always think this is a bad thing. Tobi was actually asked to leave school because he spent a lot of his time being bored. And yes, this made him a little distracting to others. He is a genius. I'm not saying that because I think he's smart. He really is a genius with an amazing mind. He was studying classic piano from aged 4. Sorry if this is making you a little bit embarrassed, but and was at university level by 13 years old. He is able to work on mathematical problems in a matter of seconds. He has a photographic memory. He can analyze a person or a situation and know everything that is going to happen next. He can finish your sentences, which he says is sometimes annoying. He can fix anything, learn new languages in a few months. Nothing is too difficult for him. And as amazing as this sounds, he thinks this is a burden sometimes. Why is that a burden? There's
a lot going on up in my head. I think that's for sure. But I think Kayla's very generous with her words.
Of course,
that's for sure.
I mean,
yeah. But I mean, I don't know about the stuff about me being really clever or whatever. But the stuff about the piano and whatever, like that's all true. Like I definitely did that stuff and was effectively kind of doing the equivalent to concert piano level performance when I was sort of 13 years old and. Yeah, just kind of the way I was always into problem solving. I said before, it was always how I was.
The burden part, what does she mean? What is she referring to?
Yeah, so I think
I've heard a few people refer to their own mental sort of cognition as a burden. Yeah. Elon Musk is one of them.
Yeah.
So
I think probably probably two things. Yeah, I think fundamentally there's so much traffic. Like in your mind, there's so much information going in and out. And it's literally also like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like it never ever kind of really stops. And I think also as well, then, and something I've been really trying to work hard on over the last sort of 12 months, like as a leader, like that communication is really hard. So when there's so much stuff going on in your head, or like when something seems really simple and obvious and you just like, you've clearly got the answer, but trying to communicate that to other people who, for whatever reason, might not be as strong in that field, or it might not make as much sense to them. Like, that barrier can sometimes be a little frustrating. And especially like early on, in a business, like, you're trying to move at 1 million miles an hour. Not that that's really changed. Still trying to move at 1 million miles an hour, but you're trying to really move super, super fast. But when you're the person sitting there and the vision is really clear to you and you can see all the answers and whatever, and like it's right in front of you, but then you've got a team of people who are doing their best to keep up with you. And like, of course, they're doing a great job, but trying to bridge that gap can sometimes be kind of, like painful in some ways. And especially then when you couple that with someone like me who, I'm kind of self-confessed extremely impatient.
I was going to say patience is what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly right. So, so there's brains going 1 million miles an hour, really impatient, there's a bridge that you've got to cross. And so sometimes it can be a bit of a burden, but it is what it is.
Well, because when you say that, I completely get it. But then I also know my friends that are CEOs of big companies like Umar, who leads Pretty Little Thing. And I had the same conversation with him last week in LA, and he is the same. I said to him, "You're the most impatient person I know." Yeah. And I watch him get frustrated to the point of like his face going red because Umar will decide something. He'll have a vision and know it. And the problem is he needs his team to do it. Yeah. Right?
It's the lag factor. It's no different to, I don't know, for anyone listening who's ever done online gaming, right? It's like you're playing Call of Duty or something and you start lagging. It's literally the same thing. It's the frustration. But
And how have you, this is just advice for myself, how have you come to deal with that?
Yeah, look, I think, so to be honest, it's kind of like most things. I think becoming aware of that first and understanding like what the deficit or surplus is in that particular area is really critical. So for me, being aware of that and then communicating that to my team. So like, cool, like my brain goes at 1 million miles an hour. If you don't understand something or it doesn't make sense, just ask. And sometimes something as simple as like actually open the door for people to have an opinion or to be able to ask a question is actually really critical because, as a CEO, like, the person that's very often making the decisions or alternatively at least like setting the vision, sometimes people kind of want to just take what you say, immediately, yep, cool, but they're afraid to actually ask what that means and kind of validate it for themselves. So I think, the awareness and allowing that type of communication with your team members is really important. But at the end of the day, I think it's much like a lot of things in life, whether it be health and fitness or learning or whatever, like it really is a discipline. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how smart you are or how fast your brain can go or if you've got all the answers or whatever. If you can't bring other people along for the journey and you can't get them motivated about it and you can't get them to understand it clearly, it doesn't really matter. So the discipline to be patient, which is sometimes very difficult, but the discipline to be patient, and considered and communicate is really the foundation for success there.
And in Kayla's post on her Facebook page, she says a lot of very, very nice things about you and points to, I guess, a number of attributes about you that might be responsible for your personal success. But from your perspective, why do you think that you've been successful in the way that you have? And I'm talking personally in terms of not opportunity or timing or Instagram. I mean, on a personal level, what are the attributes of you as a person?
Yeah, so I think, categorically, probably a few things. I mean, you would have heard of these 1,000 times, I'm sure, and you're kind of speaking to other leaders and CEOs. But I think, I think there's the basic one is about you need to work hard. Like, I think that's a thing. And, for me, like, working hard is not a learned behavior. Like, it's actually just inherent to who I am. So working multiple jobs or working long hours or working whatever, like, I think outside the bounds of the kind of traditional 9 to 5, like yesterday was more like a 5 to 9, sort of thing. So I think, the hard work is definitely a thing. The discipline I mentioned as well is obviously a really critical thing as well, because discipline's kind of, when you're working hard but you get tired and you want to stop, like that's what's going to kind of perpetuate the momentum. Because really at the end of the day, it's about building momentum and maintaining it. And, so having the discipline and the drive is really the two things that are going to keep that going. And I think really like outside of that, a lot of things kind of cascade from that, like it's the like, learning and self-development, like, well, that's still like you got to be driven to want to learn and you got to be disciplined to keep learning. I think surrounding myself with like really, really, highly intelligent and experienced people as well to help, again, perpetuate the momentum has been really critical. But I think everyone kind of has their own secret sauce, and I think if I had to get kind of out of the generalist, sort of stuff, like I think, probably my greatest strength is being really like detail oriented and really strong in information architecture. And so what I mean by that basically is that a lot of people would probably describe me as OCD, like highly OCD. But I would just describe that as highly specific about what I want. And I think on the information architecture thing about being able to frame things in a way that makes sense and being able to organize things in a way that makes sense for a lot of people kind of breaks down the barriers again, like I mentioned before, for communication to generate that momentum for the team. So, yeah.
Awesome. And, you're a very young business person. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but it's not always easy as a young person to get into business because I guess you have more to prove. People expect less from you.
Yeah, sure.
But I also think in some respects that them taking you for granted creates an opportunity as well in some respects. Talk to me about what it's like being a young person trying to get into business and your experiences of that.
I think obviously it depends who you're in the room with. But I think, there's definitely some pretty savage experiences. I've literally been shown up to a meeting before, gone into walk with someone and literally just been literally marched out. Like, because 30 seconds into the meeting, they're like, you're just a kid, don't care. Like, it doesn't actually matter, like, what you're talking about. They don't, some people generally don't care. And, that's a very, kind of broad stroke, remark. But there are genuinely some people that just don't care. If you walk into a meeting room and you're sort of 20, 25 years old, they just don't really value your opinion. But I think, without being negative on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's also some people that are tremendously welcoming, and so I think, again, like part of the journey is, having the resilience to survive what are, probably the shitty meetings, or the shitty people that you network with, and to try and find the rose amongst the thorn type situation, like where is the person that doesn't judge me for my age or for my, lack of knowledge in certain areas, because I think part of being young as well or of any age is you might be an expert in whatever software engineering and product development, but you might not know anything about finance. And so you go on to meet with an accountant or whatever, and because you're actually doing really well at something, there's kind of a preconceived expectation that you must think you're pretty good. But then when you come into a meeting vulnerable, I don't actually really know a lot about this, but I really want to learn. They kind of get almost taken back by that. I think it is hard in some ways being a young person, trying to do business, but I think it's only as hard as you let it be hard for yourself. At the end of the day, you can get emotional about that and emotional about a lot of things in business, or you can kind of just go.
For the last couple of years, I've been working on something that I realized every podcaster listening to this, but actually probably every creator listening to this might just need. Podcasting is difficult for many reasons. And one of them is that these hosting platforms don't give you much information. And also because they're so fragmented, you kind of have to go through every single platform, uploading it to YouTube and then taking the same big old video file and uploading it to Spotify's platform. It takes huge amounts of time, and that friction means most of us don't do it. That is the problem we set out to solve. And so we built something called Flightcast, which you can find at flightcast.com. And today, Flightcast is also one of our show sponsors. And some of the world's biggest podcasters are now using our platform to run their shows because it gives you an edge. It saves you time. It gives you analytics most people won't typically get. It allows you to use AI to be more informed on your show, and it has growth tools that other hosting platforms don't have. So podcasters that are using Flightcast have this unfair advantage. So go to flightcast.com/DOAC now.
It off and kind of move on to the next thing, So
you started when you were 21, 22?
Yeah, I started as a PT, actually running my own business at probably 19.
Right.
But it really started to, pick up and get kind of more serious around 21 years old. Which, you're traveling the world, and even not we're a fully bootstrapped organization, but I think, met with a lot of investors sort of around that age as well. And it's, some of them certainly more forthcoming than others, that's for sure. Yeah.
And you mentioned there that there's a lot of savage times. Much of I think because of various films and Instagram quotes and all these kinds of things, a lot of people see entrepreneurship as being a pretty rock star thing, like jet skis, lots of holidays, private jets, money, cars, and everything in between. And Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah. I think that we live in a society and generation where things are probably or definitely hyped up a little bit. Yeah, and I think as well, like a lot of people want to, yeah, and well, maybe rightfully so, they're really proud of what they've achieved and they really want to show that off and whatever. But I think that being set as the benchmark for, the aspiration for a lot of our generation is probably what the actual mistake is. So I think, showcasing it and being proud, of course, is cool. It's one thing. But I think if you're someone who is not in that position and you're at the very beginning of your journey, I think aiming for that is actually the wrong aim, like in a multitude of different ways. I'm sure, probably yourself and an abundance of other people that like there's this, having money is cool and having things and whatever is cool and whatever, but ultimately there's a really, really, really distinct realization that happens kind of early on in the journey, and that is that's not like, and as much as other people want to argue, like that's not actually going to bring you joy in life at all. Like the thing that brings you joy is the journey. It's every win that you get, and not necessarily just the win about money. It's the win about progress that you've made. You've just hired a really elite person who's going to like just add massive gains to the business, like whatever. It's all those little wins that are actually the good things. The car and the house and the private jets and the whatever, like, that's cool. And it's fun for about 30 seconds and whatever. But after a while, like who are you really actually pleasing? Is that pleasing yourself or is that pleasing other people would probably be my argument. But
at what point on that point of money, if I give you, this is basically yes or no question, is if I give you another £1 million now, would you be happier?
No, not at all.
At what point did your happiness stop scaling based on income?
Question. Yeah. Look, I think, I don't think that I'd be able to say like, it was at this dollar point. But I think that really there was probably a realization sort of as Kayla's brand started to lift off and we started to make this pivot into the app that was like it then everything just became so exciting. And like, to be honest, not that I think that any accountant or financial controller would want to hear this, but you almost forget about the money. Like really it just becomes, it's just a measuring stick. Like, did we win this quarter better than last quarter? Like that's the grade, yes or no, right? But I think like for me, like I was literally just dumped into the middle of like learning software engineering and learning marketing and user experience and automation and whatever. And for me, that was like literally the best part of the journey and still is the best part of the journey. Like I got to learn all of this like front, kind of like leading world-class sort of stuff that otherwise I wouldn't be exposed to, and for me, that's an epic part of it. And, like being here today, like meeting someone like yourself, same age, like killing it in a completely different space, like that stuff is actually worth it. That's the memory that I'll be able to talk about, even if I have $0 one day.
Sure.
But you can't, like, when you do have $0 potentially in the future, you're not going to look back and be like, oh, it was so great when I had all that money, like, because that's going to be depressing, right? But like, being able to go back and be like, oh yeah, we achieved this, like, we ran boot camp tours for 100,000 women around the world, like, like we literally changed the space, like that's awesome, and that's going to last forever. That won't ever fade. And
I think I know the answer to this question, but are you scared of losing it all?
Look, I think that anyone would be lying if they said no. I think there'd be different reasons why people are fearful, that's for sure. But I think I think to be honest, and again, like part of a good entrepreneur and the thirst and drive for success it's probably a fear of failure. I don't think it's necessarily a fear of like losing $1 in the bank account, but it's more about like, it's a fear of going backwards. It's a fear of slowing down. It's a fear of the product not being as good. It's a fear of, not being the front runner, like all of those things. Like, I don't think that that's something that anyone's going to be happy about. That's for sure. But I think, I don't think that would necessarily for me specifically have anything to do with money. It's more about progress. Like my obsession and my drive is for progress, not for dollars.
And what is your long-term aim then? If you're obsessing over progress, what is, 10 years progress to you? What does that look like?
So, if we zoom in a little bit, like, on the business. So, Sweat effectively we kind of define as, a digital gym. So our desire is to be the world's biggest digital gym. We view the fitness industry basically as being, fragmented. So like there's big box gyms, there's 24/7s, there's, your Soul Cycle and F45 boutique experiences. And then there's hundreds and thousands of fitness apps and trainers and whatever online. The last segment of that is the segment that we play in. How do we aggregate all of that? When you think about music, right, you think about Spotify. If you think about entertainment or movies, you think about Netflix. When you think about working out, think about anybody, right? So in 5 or 10 years' time, when you think about working out, you'll think about Sweat.
Okay. Love it. I'm sold. Let's take a step back. So when I say hard times, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Or the first things?
Probably. So I think the very first launch of our app. Probably to kind of summarize that in really short, go into this project to launch an app to kind of pivot the business. Expect to spend sort of $200,000 to $250,000 building it. Spend sort of the better part of $750,000. Hope it's going to take sort of 12 to 14 weeks. Takes you kind of the better part of a year. So after all that time and all the extra money and effort that's gone into it, you finally get to launch day and you're like, this is great. Like, people are going to love this. Like, it's going to be a really big win. The company's just going to go to the next level. You press that big red button to go live. And in the first 24 hours, you kind of get 25,000 complaints.
Wow.
Yeah. When you got a team of sort of like, at this point, maybe 20 or 25 people who have like literally worked their ass off for a year, and they're all looking at you like, why didn't it work? And then you've also got 25,000 consumers looking at you like, well, that was crap.
Yeah.
So I think there's what we were just talking about. There's the fear of like, shit, like, did I just mess this up? Like, did I just break everything? And then there's what the hell am I going to say to the staff that are here? And then there's we've actually also got 25,000 members, that we kind of need to service and be like, provide a good experience to, and everyone literally is looking at you. So I think at that point in time, that's, when you talk about, fear, or you talk about like hard times or whatever, like for me, that's probably one that's kind of stitched into my memory pretty well. Yeah.
Is there another?
There's plenty, but I think, maybe something like, something as fearful, like every business goes through kind of like, difficulties, like, setting things up, like getting your website URL,
sure.
Like, whatever. And like, so I wouldn't really say there's not necessarily like another like massive one, but I think there's probably like tens or hundreds of like small things like that, a lot of people kind of, either don't remember along the way or whatever. Like it's the only thing that matters at that point in time. But then like 2 weeks later, when the next one comes up, like that's the only one that matters. But so I think, along the journey, you're constantly faced with these, like what at the time they feel like kind of world crushing events. And they kind of are in many ways, emotionally and mentally, but then sort of 2 to 4 weeks later, you're already on to the next one.
And what have you learned about hard times because of that? Because they happen so frequently in the world that you've put yourself in.
Yeah.
What, in hindsight, if someone's going through a hard time, or if they encounter a hard time, someone like yourself who is very much sped up the amount of hard times that they experience by stepping outside of your comfort zone, what insight can you give us into hard times?
Sure. So, first and foremost, it is totally okay to be emotional, and it is like you should at all times be aware and conscious and feel your emotions. However, no matter how emotional you are, your emotions will never ever fix the problem.
Interesting.
Right. So it doesn't matter like how sad you are, it doesn't matter how angry you are, does like that. That's, short of that motivating you to solve the problem, that's not actually going to fix the problem, So like, this is probably kind of referring back to my OCD and my detail sort of thing. But, my mind will kind of go like, oh, like that sucks. Shit. Okay, cool. So the solution for the problem is blah, right? Like, and that's really the way that my brain works. So, so I think that, if people are going through like repeated amount of hard times, like it's cool. Like, and you need to have an outlet, and like sometimes people need to complain and they need to vent and whatever to their friends and family. But I think again, it's kind of like, discipline, do that, time out, and then go and win. Right? Because the reality is like you could dwell on one problem for 6 months or a year even. You could be really upset about it. But all that time you spent being emotional and upset about it is just wasted time. You could have been making progress. And so like, I think, a lot of people would probably refer to, a lot of like really successful people and, maybe me as an entrepreneur as well as like probably kind of intense, but like it's that intensity to move and an intensity to win and intensity to kind of frog leap your problems is what generates a momentum and perpetuates the growth for the organization. I think, if you have a leader in your organization, or if you are the leader of your organization and you want to sit there for weeks and weeks and weeks on end kind of complaining about the problem, like you've not really achieved anything. You know, so
do you have, I think everybody does, but do you have people within your organization? Now, let me reframe this question because I don't want to make it about your organization, but have you worked with people across, and I don't even really know if this is a question, I'm basically just saying this and seeing what you think about it. But I've worked with people over the last couple of years, maybe over the last 5 years, where when something bad happens, say the room is on fire, they'll be the type of person who will repeatedly let you know that the room is on fire, right? And they'll scream, the room is on fire, the room is on fire. They'll tell their team the room is on fire. They'll tell everybody they can that the room is on fire. And there's another type of person who will be in a room that's on fire, and instead of saying it because it's clearly obvious that the fucking room is on fire and that's not helpful right now, they'll be solely focused on how we get out of the room. And I've always thought that the type of people that as a CEO you have to give the leadership roles to are the type of people that are the solution orientated ones, because the first type of person who will just say that the room is on fire, if they're given a leadership role, because emotions can be quite contagious in business, the worry is they will pass those emotions through the organization. Well,
it's a fact, right? So statistically, like 70% of the emotion and behavior of like a team and an organization is stimulated by that of their leader. You know, so like regardless, you know, whether it's a leader right at the top of the organization or whether it's a leader who's managing a team of 4 people, those 4 people will still inherit behaviors from their leader, right? So I couldn't agree more. You know, the second person sounds like someone you want to hire, right? The first person sounds like someone, not only do you probably not want them in a leadership role, but you probably, and again, being savage, but you probably don't really want them in your organization at all. Like, because the reality is, like, even if they're not, responsible for like driving and leading the team, they're still sitting next to someone, and that someone's still sitting next to someone, and that someone's still, like, I mean, it's like, it's really, it is in many ways like a compounding domino effect. And I think, it's those conversations, it's the water cooler conversations and whatever, like everything that kind of creates and perpetuates culture. Like, I mean, we again would probably say that we're pretty hard on that. It's end conversation. What's the solution? And then if it's continuous, it's on fire, it's on fire, it's on fire. It's probably like, well, maybe we need to have a discussion about how you deal with problems. Why? And then if not,
fine.
And that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that, your workplace and environment and your team, whatever, is not necessarily for them. Like, I think, a lot of people would view like terminating an employee or whatever, like as a bad thing. And I think in some ways, if you're like, you're fired, get out, like that's probably a little mean. You should always shy on the side of caution with an employee and be there to support them, of course. But, if an employee, if you identify and they can also agree and identify that the workplace is not right, like, it's like a bad relationship. Like, don't force it to remain together. You could be better off apart. So
I completely agree. I didn't know that stat as well, so I'm going to use that a lot. That 70%. I need to like research that after this. But one of the things that Kayla wrote on her Facebook post was that sometimes people think you're arrogant. Explain that to me. I've got a question on that point, but what does she mean?
Well, I think any person that's in a room that's extremely certain about what they want and extremely certain about the solution can sometimes, confidence can very often be mistaken for arrogance. I think probably what I would delineate as being the key differentiating factor there really would be that, someone who's confident, someone who perhaps maybe has the answers or believes in their own abilities, but has something that actually can validate that. So like, a professional golfer can be confident in their ability to putt a ball in, right? Whereas if you've never played golf in your life and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to smash you, you're going to get holes in ones, like that's probably more so arrogance because you don't actually have the experience and you've never done it before. Sure. I think there's a grey area there somewhere in between about, like how you communicate that and how you show yourself and how you show up to things. But I think that generally speaking, like colloquially, people who are extremely confident and who are maybe not known so well by someone else, that can very often come across as arrogance. But,
sure. Yeah. And that often attracts a lot of hate.
Yeah,
haters.
Sure.
Topic I wanted to talk about with you generally, because I mentioned it in my last podcast, was about the topic of haters.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you've had any haters because I've not.
No, for sure we have, yeah.
But I'm sure you have, right? And I think in today's age where we're all connected and we get to see a lot into other people's lives and read their stories in an instant, I think everybody has haters, people that will, especially successful people, right?
Yeah, very much.
So what's your view on that? And have you had haters that literally, no matter what you do, will just say you're a piece of shit?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, well, the famous saying is haters going to hate, right? Like that's going to happen kind of regardless of who you are. Like, and to be honest, like you don't even need to be successful, like, in however you measure success, whatever that is, right? But you don't even need to be successful to be hated, right? I think that the reality is that and maybe this is like, a shock horror to society, but we don't actually all need to get along and be best mates. Like now, just to add some flavor to that, we shouldn't all hate each other as well, right? But not getting along and not being best mates doesn't mean that you hate one another, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that in society and, social media perhaps perpetuates this a little bit, but I think that's kind of what the view is to some people. It's like you're either best mates or you hate each other, right? There's no kind of like in between. But I think, being successful and maybe, let's just use it as the limelight, right? If you're in the limelight, you're in the media or you're online or you've got fans or whatever, like, most people that are going to be haters probably don't actually even know you. They've probably never even met you. Right. So I think that, and again, it's kind of like how do you deal with your problems we were talking about before. Like, I think that, people are going to leave, abusive and, probably, dumb comments on your page or whatever if they don't know who you are, just because they've got an opinion, they're a keyboard warrior and that's cool and they feel they need to express themselves. I think it's the person who's, the being hated, or being hated on or whatever, it's their decision to kind of be like, well, am I going to engage with that and waste my time and emotional energy, like actually like justifying that? Or am I confident in myself and who I am as a person and just going to leave it and move on? Mm-hmm. So I think hate and jealousy and whatever is inevitable. But again, it's, do you want to waste time dealing with that, or do you want to spend your time getting more gains?
Yeah. And one of the, hate comes in various forms from various different people, but sometimes it comes a little bit closer to home. Yeah. And I think this is hate's probably not the right word, but let's say like just negativity generally. One of the most popular messages I get into my inbox is from young people who have an ambition or a business they want to start or a project they want to pursue or a career, and their mum, dad, boyfriend, girlfriend doesn't believe they can do it, is being critical, is sometimes people can speak just by the facial expression they give you when you say something. Yeah. That type of behavior. What's your advice to people like that?
Like first and foremost, like so if you're trying to go out and do something and you've got goals and whatever, and you're going to go out and try and crush it, and like your best mate, your bro, partner, family, whatever, tell you that that's a dumb idea and that you shouldn't do it, I think, first and foremost, does what they're saying, is that saying something about you, or is it saying something about them? For a start. Like, so are they telling you it's a shit idea because like they actually genuinely think that the idea is shit, or are they saying that it's a shit idea because they are fearful that you might go and succeed, or that they're jealous that you're actually having a crack because you've got, the confidence to go and do it, or because maybe they're afraid that, you might actually succeed, you might actually dominate and then they won't, be on the same level as you. And so
is that a real thing? Do you reckon that's
it's a massive thing? So like, I'll tell you stories like, my best mate, like his name's Mitch. We've been best mates for 15 years, and I, slept on the floor of his house sometimes, when I wasn't living at home or whatever. Like we've been through some savage times together, and he came from a family that were, they did it right. They were well off, right? And he's working really hard now to do his best and to try to dominate in life, and he's giving it a red hot crack. But, a couple of months ago sitting there and he's like, we're on the treadmill, was walking to my gym, and he's just like, I was like, how was last week, mate? Like, what'd you do last week? And he's like, just at work, man. Just, trying to do some study, trying to, improve my things, whatever. He's like, what'd you do? And I was like, I spoke to 8,000 people at OMR, just got back from like, Germany, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of goes quiet for a second. He's just like, man, like sometimes I can imagine it would be hard for me as a person to be friends with someone like you, because what I say is, I'm doing my things and I'm living my normal life, doing whatever, I'm working as hard as I can. But what you do is always so extreme and always so this and that and the other. And he's like, but, that's only really bad if I think about it in that mindset. If I go, but you're my best mate and you're actually winning at life and that's really amazing. Like, I'm really happy for you. So that's the mindset shift, right? He's able to kind of be like, well, just because I'm not doing what you're doing and what you're doing is really cool and awesome, doesn't mean that I need to be negative to you. I could actually go in with a positive mindset, be like, congratulations, man, that's sick. And, he's, going to, buying his first house and whatever at the moment. And I'm like, cool, man, like, like good luck. Like, I want you to win, like, go get it. Like, it's no different to like in that situation, like, someone could turn around and be like, oh, well, that's not good enough, but that's not really achieving anything.
And how do you spot those people within your friendship circle? Because I sometimes think, if you've got bad apples in your friendship circle, they have more influence, more potential to tear you down than strangers do. Is there a way to know who's on your side and who's not?
Well, I think, whatever it is that you do to recognize them, spot them quickly. Because it's a waste of time otherwise. But I think, I think, yeah, I mean, it's exactly like, yeah, what's their facial expression? What's their response? Like, what do they communicate to you? Like when you're talking about the thing that you are most passionate about, if you're talking to someone about something that you just really want to win out and you're so passionate about and they're telling you, no, it's like, well, either one, I'd be having a conversation with them about that to let them know that, kind of like, hey man, this is really important to me. Like, so if you're going to keep shutting it down, then there's going to be an issue. And if they keep doing that, then it's probably, intense and whatever, but like, is that person adding value to your life or are they draining energy and emotion from your life? And this is a really, really like blunt, like hardcore approach. But again, like, you live your life to make yourself happy and those around you happy. In that situation, you're not making yourself happy and you're also not actually making them happy either, quite obviously. So like, I think, a lot of people get stuck in this mindset. They're like, oh, but we were friends in high school, bro. Like, known you for so long. We got to be mates forever. It's like, that doesn't have to happen. And again, just because you might drift apart from someone doesn't make you a bad person or them a bad person. Like, that's just life, right? So.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that really made me think because along the way, I think specifically with my business partner, when he, dropped out of university and joined me in my first business, every time he posted on his Facebook, it was his mates from back home taking the piss out of him. So he would post one of his achievements, he'd won an award, and it would be a flurry of his friends, quote unquote, back home, ripping him to pieces. I didn't have that because from a very young age, everyone I grew up with knew who I was, but he changed. So he went from being the kid that was probably in some respects the butt of the joke amongst his friends to now being successful, quote unquote.
Good on him.
Yeah, and I think his circle struggled to adapt to that. Next topic I wanted to talk to you about is personal mistakes. I read online about your speeding offence and those things. Being completely transparent, I got banned from driving too.
Yeah, there you go.
For my own stupidity. I got banned from driving in the first week that I passed my test. Apparently I was going 101 miles an hour on the motorway in a Range Rover. The week after I passed, I had no fucking idea I was. It was 4 a.m. in the morning. I just dropped someone off at the airport in London and I was driving back to Manchester. But talk to me about that process and what that taught you.
Well, yeah, I think... I think first and foremost, something that was really valuable that came out of that was that that was a really kind of great notification of the fact that I kind of changed from being a kid, running a business, into a leader, leading a team and like leading an organization and leading a vision. And so I think, if anything for me, that kind of was a really, really good learning curve to understand that it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, it doesn't matter how small the mistake is or whatever, but it's more about the message that it actually sends. And so like as a leader, like I mentioned before, like obviously, a huge portion of the behavior of any organization is stimulated by that of the leader. It's like, well, how am I actually showing up to work and what do people think? Because it's not enough. Like, it's not enough to just win and it's not enough to just be smart. It's how you win. So are you winning and being the douchebag that's like going around bragging to everyone about how great you are, or are you winning and then taking your team out for dinner and celebrating with them because they've had a massive achievement and like actually getting around them and congratulating them? Because at the end of the day, like no organization, Steve Jobs, like great dude, obviously ultra smart, visionary, genius, whatever. It's like, but he won because he had an incredible team around him as well. And without the people, he couldn't have done that. So as a leader, I think that doing, making a mistake or whatever it is, speeding, fine, cool, whatever, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's like, what did you take away from that? And so for me, like I took away like, well, I can actually have a profound impact on people by doing good things and or bad things. What am I going to choose to do? Well, let's choose to do some good things. So that was kind of what I took out of that.
And, I read that there's over 20 million people using your products. Is that accurate? So we would have had in total, I think about 35 million people use the product now in total. Obviously there's different amount of people using it at any given point in time, but yeah, plenty of people. Yeah. And this is across the body guides, the app, Sweat.
Yep. All of our trainers now. Yeah. Spread across.
The books, the accessories.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's to be honest, man, like I think it's sometimes you forget about how many people that actually is and how many people are being affected by like what we're doing in a really, really good way. You know, like, so that's, you know, nearly 2 times the population of the country that I grew up in. Yeah. And like, that's like, and for me, like, you know, early on, like, again, like, yeah, you're always focused on the wins and the gains and the progress and how you do that stuff. But every now and again, like, you know, calling out that stuff and being like, wow, like, we've actually like had a pretty big impact on like literally millions of people's lives. And like, that's a pretty big, like, wow moment, you know, for me and for Kayla. So,
and this is a bit of an obscure question. It's not written down anywhere. So I just sometimes, you know, because we're coming to the end of this conversation, so I just wanted to go off in a couple of random directions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you scared of dying?
That's a good question. I would say, so I'll put it this way. Would be scared of not being able to add value, all the value to the world that I believe I can add.
And how much of value is that?
A lot more than what I'm adding currently. So, in other words, I'm not so much fearful about the notion of not being here and being on the planet. Like, I think that's an inevitable thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens over the next 50 years, right? But I think, you know, more so, like, I think that, you know, I'm, again, in, you know, arrogance, confidence, whatever, like, I'm really confident that, you know, based on, like, how passionate I am and how driven I am and the stuff that I've been able to learn and the stuff that I inevitably will learn, that I think that I can do some pretty cool things for people and I can add some pretty good value. And whether that's on, like, a individual level or whether that's 35 million women around the world, you know, like, I think that I'm really blessed to be in the position that I am in, and I'm really blessed to have the mindset that I have, you know, so I think that I would be afraid, you know, I'd be afraid to not be here and, you know, if we die or whatever, you know, if I, you know, hadn't really had a red hot crack at being able to do that in a big way. And, you know, so I think that we've done an all right job to date, but I think I'm still kind of only really just getting warm.
Mm-hmm. So I guess it's fear of untapped potential.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's just it's, you know, it'd be fear of waste, you know, basically.
I guess last question then, which is a piece of advice. You know, I've read through your story and it was super inspiring. You're now on various rich lists and things like that. Your Lamborghini, I hear.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I got rid of it. Yeah.
What Lamborghini was it?
It was a Huracan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very drivable car here.
Yes, it is.
Not that I would fucking know, but you've got 35 million people using your products and all these things. You know, there's going to be some people out there that are listening to this podcast right now, and they have big dreams. They have a level of belief that they can achieve those dreams, and they're living a life that is not true to who they are. Yeah, this is probably like, you know, it's the number one reported regret of the dying is that they didn't live a life true to themselves.
Should have done this, should have done that.
Yeah, they should have done, and things they should, you know, and they kind of let life pass them by for whatever reason. What, you know, and this is also probably the most common message I get in my inbox. What message do you give to those people that think maybe the life that they're living isn't completely true to who they are? And like, is there anything actionable that they can do to pursue that? Big question. So
yeah, no, like good questions, man. Good questions. Yeah, I think. Well, I think I said this like really, really early on, you know, when I was talking about like some of the adversity that I went through, like as a younger person. But I think like at the end of the day, like, you know, who's in the driver's seat, man? Like, who's driving? You know, like every single person on this planet effectively is in control of their life in one way or another. Like a lot of people can, you know, put some extreme situation up and say like, I'm not in control of this, I'm not in control of that, and you know, so on and so forth. And in some cases, perhaps that's true. But the thing that is consistent and common among every single person on the planet is that they're in control of something that impacts their life. You know, so like, sure, you might not have enough money to move out of home and you might not have a job and this and that and the other and whatever it's like, but you can control what you choose to learn to get a job. You know, you can control what you choose to do with your time. You can control whether you want to have one job or two jobs. Yeah, you can control whether you want to spend that money on a house or spend that money on a holiday or spend that money on a car. You know, and so there's no right path. You know, I think that right now there's a battle between, you know, maybe the millennials and our parents, people being like, oh, you've got to go to university and you've got to get a house and you've got to do whatever, right? You know, if you want to have kind of like what we would forecast as being a generally pretty successful and decent life, like that's one way to go about it, right? But I don't think that rule book necessarily matters anymore. But at the same time, I don't think that everyone in the millennial generation also wants to go through that. Like they don't necessarily all want to have money. Some people just might want to live a relatively normal, humble life. They might want to travel once a year or twice a year and whatever, right? So I think that, you know, first, if you want to, you know, first thing, get in control, but figure out what you want to do. Because like running a business isn't for everyone.
100%.
Yeah, so like I think that it's cool to be like, oh, like Lambos, man, and like private jets and like whatever, right? It's like, but do you actually want that life? Because that life's not about just having the car. That life's also about the long days. It's about the pressure and the stress and the whatever. Yeah, and you might not want that. Do you want the house and the kids and whatever? Like, no, maybe you don't. So I think everyone's in control. We've all got equal control. I think it's about taking the control to the extreme and then controlling what you want. And then working towards getting it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, mate.
It's been great to get to meet you.